Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Robbie.
And I'm Jason.
And welcome.
Welcome to the table.
To the table. There it is. Perfect. Yeah, we can work it out. Super excited to have you guys here. We are recording this on Halloween, although it won't come out till Thursday. So by the time you guys hear this, we're going to be deep into November. But it's a spooky day here and ready to dive into an awesome game. How you doing today, Jason?
I'm doing well. I'll piggyback. Happy Halloween to everyone. We actually adjusted our schedule a little bit earlier. We're filming a little bit earlier in the day to make sure we can enjoy our Halloween festivities tonight. But again, it'll be a few days after Halloween, so we're doing well. We love treats on Halloween, and one of the treats I have to brag about and I'm so happy about is that we are over 700 views on YouTube. Thank you so much for all of the folks who've watched the podcast or listened to it via YouTube Premium on YouTube. That's how I like to do YouTube. And we were close to 400 downloads across all of our podcast platforms. We are so grateful for that. It's just exciting and it's fun. I just like talking about board games. Robbie likes talking about board games. Yeah. We're getting good feedback from we're both in a disc golf community, so I keep getting crossovers from disc golf hit me up and say, hey, I found this through you being on disc golf stuff. And it's just fantastic. Thanks to Grip Locked for giving us a shout out. Go check out Grip Locked if you want to go watch some good disc golf content. One thing that you can help us out along with sharing with your friends and family, if you want them to kind of learn about some games that are good for beginners, is leave a comment, leave a review specifically on the podcast side of that. That really helps us out. It helps with the algorithm. It helps us see more people. And we are truly thankful. It's a good treat for us at the Halloween time. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. Dude, that was a fantastic transition, Jason. Fantastic. This man is just a few episodes into being a podcaster, and he's already got show the man some love. That deserves a like in itself. So we are super, super grateful to be doing this. It really has been I host a podcast over in the disc golf world, but it was built on an already established, I have an established disc golf brand. We were put on an established disc golf, podcasting network, so that kind of naturally pulls in views, and so it's just been really, really fun diving into a new world that Jason and I are both already pretty involved in and pretty deep in terms of our love of the niche, but trying to join the content creation side can definitely be something different and a unique moment in itself. So it really has been fantastic getting to dive into all of that. So Jason, it's been another few weeks since we filmed an episode, and I feel like it's going to be such a weird world because it's not that you've been traveling every single episode, but I feel like there's just been a swarm of people around you to play games with that you don't normally have. So what games have you played since?
Yeah, this is for sure. It's in the last few weeks, and I know we recorded 2 weeks ago, but I've been lucky that I've had enough people around, and I'm slowly getting more gamers in our community. So I have mini game nights, even if it's just a couple's over. But so I've been lucky. I played 9 or 10 games just in the last 5 or 6 days. But I will specifically highlight 2 games. One of them I thought about highlighting, but I know you're going to highlight it instead that you've been playing. But so 2 of the ones, and I did a post about this today, kind of highlighting the games we played. But For Sale is the first one I'm going to mention. It's for gamers, it's kind of an OG auction style game. For new people, it's one that every time I've shown it, it's one of those games that when I show a new player, by the end of the game, they love it and they're ready to play again. I think I've said this in a previous episode that we had a work game night back in the spring, and by the end of the first game, Hunter and Trevor had literally already gone to Amazon, ordered it, and it was coming in 2 days. That's how excited they were about For Sale. The gist of For Sale, it's a 2-round game in which you're bidding for properties. And then in the second round, you're selling properties. But the art is really cool and cute. I've never really looked close to the art, but if you look at the art, as the property value go up, it's it goes up to fancy castles down to a little doghouse, right? So it's pretty cool art that I always overlook, but it is really cool. Most new players look at it and go, oh my gosh, how cool is that? But it's just so quick. It's so easy. And even if you don't get it, because it's such a quick game, you play it really quick. It's done in 10, 15 minutes maybe, especially if you have a larger group, it'll go a lot faster. And we had 6 players for our game the other night. And as soon as we're done, we were ready to go again. And so we went through it again. there is strategy. We've learned over the years how to do strategy, and I even kind of gave it away. I gave away my strategy early. I said, all right, guys, I never tell anybody this, but here's the strategy you need to do. And I won't give it away here because you need to learn it on your own in case I play you in public. But we just love the quickness of it. It's a quick, light, easy game, and it's fun to see how you can steal a 15 from somebody or steal a 14, because when you're selling the properties, you're selling them from anywhere from 0 to 15,000, and you may get stuck with that 0, or you may pull a 15,000 from someone. So it's a good one. There are some of my lighter games that I kind of get tired of playing. Like I love Scout. We talked about Scout. I'm going to put Scout on the shelf for a little while. I've played it so much, but For Sale is rarely one that I get tired of playing, for sure. The other one we pulled out is one I just forget how good it is. And it's called Wits and Wagers, the It's Vegas Baby version of that. Now, Wits and Wagers, I've never played other Wits and Wagers, but I think it's very similar in that there's just, it goes up to 6 or 8 people. We played with 5 or 6, and essentially it's a trivia style game, and that a question is asked, something like to the effect of, how deep is the largest lake in North America? And so all the answers are always numbers. Everybody writes down privately their number. They put it out. You put them from descending to ascending. You put them in ascending from lowest to highest. And then in the It's Vegas Baby, you're betting on who got closest without going over. So you're trying to have the most money at the end of the game. And it's just, I say it's trivia, but you would have to have like a really wide brain to have really good trivia on this, because there's all kinds of things. And of course the questions are from no later than 2013, because that's how old my game is. Yeah. So the questions are a little older as well, and things have changed because there were sports questions and Disney princess questions. But it was a massive hit. The first game we played, Brody ended up with $0. And the second game we played, Elizabeth like literally came close more than once to actually getting the right answer, which we've never actually seen a right answer in all the times I've played Wits and Wagers. But it was like wild how close she was coming to get the right answer, and she smoked us, and I ended up with $0. The gist of that is you don't really have to know stuff. You don't have to be that Jeopardy scholar type person to do well at Wits and Wagers, because even if your answer is nowhere right, is not, your answer is almost irrelevant. If you're the one who gets closest without going over, you get a monetary bonus. But it's irrelevant later on. What's really, how well can you bet and guess and read people on, oh, they really know that answer. I know that, Elizabeth is a big dancer, so she would know this. I know that, Dakota's into Dungeon and Dragons, so if there's Dungeon and Dragon question that comes up, he knows that. Whatever that may be. I was a Tour de France. I was a cyclist fan, so we had a Tour de France question a few years ago that, of course, I came the closest to. So everybody literally bet on me, so it was almost a wash, right? Because they knew that I was going to have the best answer, and I knew it fairly well. So you're almost reading the other players as much as you're reading, as much as you're using your own knowledge. And it doesn't matter how much you know about it. You can still have fun playing that game. And even if you end up with no money, it's okay, because you're just going big and trying to have fun with that. So I forget how fun Wits and Wagers is. But it's definitely one that, as I'm hosting more game nights, especially for larger groups, it's not really made for a 4-person game. You really want that 6 to 7-person game, because the good thing about this from a beginner's perspective is simultaneous play. A question's asked, you put an answer, you put it down, you bet, and you go. And it's exactly 6 rounds or 7 rounds. So it's a really quick game as well. So there's the two ones. Very, very, For Sale's kind of a strategic game, but Wits and Wagers definitely a party type game, and we had a blast with them.
Yeah, I definitely think we could do a party game episode. And we had talked before you went and played. I know you had said you were going to play that, and I was like, what's the difference between the Vegas edition and the standard? Because I own the standard edition and never played the Vegas edition. And I saw the picture of the board you posted. So the concept plays the exact same. The only difference is in the Vegas spot, there are more places to bet on answers. So it looked like on the Vegas one, you had like bet reds for this half of the board, which paid 1-to-1, or you can bet black this side. Whereas in the standard version, there is no like all encompassing, like I get this half the board or this half. You're either on or you're off. You get to bet. You have 2 guesses each time. So you can stack them both on the same thing and go all in, or like whatever it may be, and then you can ramp it up with the chips you earn. So all of that is the same. And I'm with Jason. Like, we have played that. I would say some of our best personal jokes inside of our friend group, like that have played games for years, come from Wits and Wagers, including the name itself, who one of our friends one night saw it and she was like, oh, we should play Wits and Waggers. And we looked at her like, Courtney, that is That is not what that word is.
And that's never going away. You will always be known as the Wits and Waggers lady. So.
Well, we have that, and like one of the questions was, when did women get the right to vote in the United States? Which is 1920, for those of you who are unaware of this answer. So if you ever find yourself, you're not our other friend who was like, I don't know, like 1978. So all of us put 1920 because we knew it. And then he put that, and we all just looked at him like, bud, that's not good. So sometimes, yeah, you get those, but yeah, Wits and Wagers, really, really fun. It is one that I almost always pack up if I'm going on a group trip, so can agree there. Yeah. 2 games I played, one of them, I've been playing the digital version, and I'll get to it in a second, but the other, I actually was I went to the library to check out today's game, and they didn't have it, so I ended up at Target to get today's game just to refamiliarize myself. And it's a game that I remember enjoying in the past, but I wanted to check it out. And while I was there, I found the Great British Baking Show board game. Now, we love going to the tents and being a part of the Great British Baking Show at our house. We watch it every episode when it comes out. Like, we pick favorites. It is our Survivor in our house. So we have seen, as a family, we have seen every season of the Great British Bake Off, or baking show, all that. So we really love it. Paul Hollywood, like getting that handshake, all that kind of deal. So we love it a lot. So I was curious with the game how it would translate. And I got to tell you, it was super fun. I actually plan on bringing it when I come up next week, Jason. Just so, have you or Elizabeth ever watched the Great British Baking Show?
I've never watched an episode. Elizabeth may have. Christopher and Mandy, her brother and sister-in-law, who are big gamers, love the show, but I've never watched an episode. So,
okay, so it is. I'm becoming more and more of a fan of games that don't have downtime. I love the strategy aspect of it, but especially for beginners, there's a funness, just like Quacks, like we talked about last episode, to you're always doing something. So the Great British Baking Show, thematically, the board game embodies so many aspects of the show, which was really, really fun. So you can really like dive into the theme, but it's the best way I can describe it is like speed Tetris. So you have your like ingredient deck of like these cards, and then you're playing, and everyone is trying to build the recipe out in front of you. And you're drawing ingredients, and if you don't like what you have, you discard it, and then you can like throw some ingredients in the trash off your bake. But everyone is baking at the same time, and you are trying to like you're trying to get your bake done faster than everyone else. Mm-hmm. So you can look for the optimal ingredients, but if someone finishes faster than you, that's going to get them more points naturally. But then if you make a better bake, that gets you more points in the judging. But if you're the last one, then you like there's penalties and things like that. So it's this kind of like, for a 2-player game, it was very interesting. I'd imagine with 3 or 4 people playing, it is chaos. So very, very fun. Made by Ravensburger. Yeah. So I'm familiar with this company from a couple of other games. And just really well done, really well thought through. The other game that I've been playing, I honestly, like I said, I can't wait for you to play. It's super goofy, and it's like it'll be one that you and I are like, okay, we just played this heavy game, or we're waiting on Elizabeth to get home, or like we're waiting whatever, and like we know we only have like 20 minutes. Let's play this, and then we'll play another game after. So super fun. We'll definitely be playing it in the future. But the other one I'm playing is Wingspan, which is Wingspan's probably a game, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have heard of before, or if you dive into the board game space, you're going to hear about Wingspan. I'm going to be honest, Jason, I would be shocked if we don't end up doing an episode on Wingspan in the future. But it'll be a bit until we have that, because I would say while it can be played by beginners, it is definitely crunchier than any game we've talked about so far. So Very, very fun game. The idea is that there's all these different birds, and you are recruiting birds or pulling birds into your habitats on your board. All these birds have different unique powers, and there are hundreds of birds. So I think the base game has 160 different birds, and they all have unique powers. So that's like you're drawing these birds in, and it's an engine builder is the type of game that it is. So you're playing on your board, you're taking one of 4 actions, and then as you build this engine, when you take said action, it gets more complicated the further the game goes on. So that simple action at first turns into a really meaningful action as you go through the game. Varied scoring goals, things like that. But I've been playing on the digital version, which is only $10 to get on the app for iOS and Google and all that. And I have just been playing a game of Wingspan every night as the last thing I do before I go to bed. So my wife is scrolling through doing her TikTok for the day, and I just play a quick game of Wingspan. It takes me about 20 minutes playing against 2 like difficult AI computers or whatever, and then I just call it a day. So it has been super fun. Really enjoying Wingspan a lot. And Jason, you're introducing me to the app world now.
Yeah, it's wild for sure. It helps me get my dopamine hit, if I'm gonna be honest, right? I want a new drug, right? To quote Huey Lewis in the news, well, those apps have been my new drug for a while, to not be able to play as many board games in person as I like. But there are so many good board game implementations and I play all my stuff on iPad. A lot of great stuff on Steam as well. Board Game Arena is actually one specifically built to do board games, and Robbie and I we both talked about doing stuff on Board Game. That's how there's a wide swath of a ton of games on Board Game Arena. But I do all of my stuff on iPad and my iPhone, but mostly my iPad. I do all of my games on that. And Robbie even texted us last night to a group chat about he does his Wingspan every night, because I used to do Agricola. Super crazy heavy game that I doubt we'll ever talk about here. Not as a featured game, put it that way. One of my all-time favorite games, but and it's one we won't show you on this trip, but definitely one trip we're going to have to show you Agricola, because it's a sit down for 2 to 3 hours to include the teach. But I go through phases where I'm playing one game over and over, and back on Agricola right now. But Wingspan was it for a long time. And then, but what's funny about my plays of Wingspan, and this is where it kind of distorted, is I don't actually look at what other players are doing. I'm playing it just to play through the cards, just because I like playing cards to do stuff and running the engine. So, but it's a great one. I think for sure one game we're going to show you on your trip up here is Everdell. People have chatted about that on some of our posts, and it's Wingspan-ish, and it has a really great app as well. But if there's one game for sure next week when you come that we're going to talk about, or we're going to play, is Everdell, because the app on it is really good as well. So, but yeah, Wingspan's great. I showed, like I said, we were talking earlier, I showed Brody when he came over, and it went really well. The gameplay went really well. I've upgraded the pieces for that, and who knows, maybe we can get Elizabeth Hargrave, the designer. Maybe that's when we talk about Wingspan, is in the future we can get Elizabeth on here to talk about it, because I know she likes trying to design games that are easier to comprehend but do have some meat to it. And Wingspan has, as we talked about, some stuff that's good, that beginners could appreciate certain things, but it is not a beginner level game anywhere near it, for sure.
Totally. It is one that, and the more you play, there are people that like, they can't. I've played it enough in the last few weeks that Jason was even telling me about his game with Brody, and he was like, "Oh, there was this one bird, and it let him tuck on every single one in the water environment." I was like, "Oh, the chiff chaff." Yeah. Y'all, I'm playing with expansions and everything, so there's more than 160 birds, and that's how much I'm playing at this point. So it's definitely one of those, like, if you really dive in a game that we'll end up talking about eventually as well, Smash Up, it's a similar vibe of like, some games you just play over and over again. That's where Jason's told me on Agricola, if I ever play him in Agricola, he's going to look at his hand and pretty much know from his starting hand, there's no way you win, because I'm just going to go huge this game. So
right, so I'll know how they attach together for sure. Wingspan can be that for sure. You're still playing the ones you're dealt. What is not that way though, and what's great about the game we're going to highlight on today, called Splendor, is that it's all open information. We all see the same stuff. So let's move on talking about our highlighted game for today. I'm gonna let Brody. Brody. You're Robbie, not Brody. I'm still thinking about that game with Brody just a couple of days ago. Wingspan. I gotta move that on because like he got me by 2 points. Where's those two? Anyway, sorry. So Robbie's going to kind of talk us through the game, but just a reminder what Bards of the Board is about, and we kind of highlight each of our games, just talking about what is good or maybe what's not good for beginning level or entry level board gamers. This podcast is for everyone because we love board games and we love talking to board gamers, right? But our focus often is specifically on what about a game makes it good or easier to understand or better for beginners or newer gamers. That'll be most of the games we talk about are going to be that way. Sometimes we talk heavier. So each of our featured game will be that way. And I'm going to let Robbie kind of tell us how the game goes and we'll kind of start the discussion from there.
Yeah. So today's game, Splendor, released in 2014, designed by Mark Andre, most likely. Published by Space Cowboy Games, and it was a Spiel des Jahres nominee. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, because I don't know if any games that we've had so far been a Spiel nominee?
I think it's a good point. I think Cascadia was. I'm going to look that up while you're still talking. I thought Cascadia was Spiel des Jahres nominee. The Spiel... Generically, in the board game world, and I'll interrupt Bobby, and Robbie was probably going there, but the Spiel is like one of the big board game awards in the world. Like if you win the Spiel, it's kind of like winning an Oscar, right? But there's not a ton of Oscars to go around. There's like one. It's like being the best picture of the year, right? When you think about that, that's what the Spiel, and there's a couple other similar ones, but the Spiel is, if you're a nominee, you're set. But if you win the Spiel, it's a big thing. Yeah. I am going to look up Cascadia while you keep talking, so...
Yeah. So, I mean, the Spiel is, when the Spiel first got explained to me, this is going to be something that I'll try to remember to, when I'm editing this, to put the like logo for the Spiel on the screen, because if you're seeing this, and even if you're an audio listener, you can Google this. It's SPIELDESJAHRES. The Spiel des Jahres. It is like hearing from board game designers, if you win the Spiel, you're going to sell thousands upon thousands of copies of your game, because there are people who like have board gamers in their life and they just know every year, I'm going to buy the Spiel winner this year, and that's what I'm getting Joe for Christmas or whatever it may be. So the fact that it's a nominee, like Jason said, huge. There's only like 6 or 8 games that are nominated for this every year. So it is a huge deal to be a nominee. In fact, it may even be less. I think it's maybe like 3 or 4.
I think it's less. I think it's 3 to 4, maybe 4 to 5, something like that, but it's a small number.
Yeah, so very, very interesting, and the fact that it's up there. Golden Geek Board Game of the Year winner by Board Game Geek, which is a fantastic website. If you're ever really wanting to dive in deep, I would say like Wikipedia has like Board Game Geek to me is the group encyclopedia of board gaming. Like if you want reviews, you want honest opinions, that is where you go. Wikipedia, you can modify the information, but like true board gamers are heading over to Board Game Geek to talk about what they want. Is that a fair play?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Lots of forums out there. What's cool about Board Game Geek is also they have lots of the designers will often go out there and answer questions. If you have specific questions about your games, if we're in a heavier game, we're like, well, what happens for this card? 99% of the time, the answer is already on Board Game Geek. And often the designer has answered the question to explain what it is. That's how trusted BoardGameGeek.com is. And it's where there are just no other sites like it. Like I don't even know of another board game site. I'm sure there's some smaller ones that are trying to compete, but it is so far advanced at what it provides to board gamers that it's hard to compete with it. And it's where we go for all of our information pretty much about that. A quick aside, Cascadia won the Spiel. I thought that was the case. Cascadia won the Spiel last year in 2022. So anyway, all right, back to
that makes sense.
back to Splendor. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. It's important for us to know because it really is a key piece there. So thematically, the game of Splendor is that you are merchants inside of the Renaissance, and you are trying to you're gathering currency in order to buy transportation, shops. Like you're trying to buy items that will eventually attract these like royals. I forget what the actual term is for them, but they're all represented by royals because, like Lindsay even pointed out when we played this week, she was like, "That's Henry VIII." Like it's just there. So you're trying to gather these things into your personal collection in order to attract these royals, and then there are victory points that you're earning through buying certain cards and attracting the royals. And when someone reaches 15 victory points, you finish that round out and the game's over. If everybody knows what they're doing, this game can go by really, really fast. So really beautiful in its simplicity. That's something that's really nice for a beginner, is that there are very few, there's really no negative action that you can take. And at the end of the day, there are inefficient actions you can take for sure, which is what separates sort of the better players from the worst players in this game. But every action that you take inherently will set you up for success down the road. And choosing to do that, it will make doing something easier by making any decision. So in your turn, you can take one of three actions. You can either gather chips or currency. The chips are all represented by precious gems or metals. I say metals because technically, like, the one is gold. But there are these like poker chips that have sapphires, emeralds, rubies, diamonds, and then there's these gold chips, which are wild cards. You can buy a card using the resources that you've gathered, or you can reserve a card. And the reserve a card is basically it's the forgotten action for sure inside of this game. And I'm sure we'll talk about that when we're kind of discussing the game. But you're doing these things, and the game always seems to start like a simple, we're just acquiring things, and it eventually just ramps up, and you're like, oh snap, everybody's grabbing points real fast. And before you feel like, okay, no one's really accomplishing anything, and oh snap, the game's about to end. I got to get points. Like that's what has to happen. So I played it 3 times this week to try to get a good feel for it. I also played it 3 times because my wife is one of those people that she wants to play a game over and over again until she wins. And so it took her 3 times to win. And in the third game, she absolutely obliterated me. So it was, Jason, she beat me like 16-8. It was bad.
I've been there and done that with Elizabeth. I think our first game we played the other day, it was like 16-10. And it was just obvious. For a while, I was like, oh, I got this game. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, she's taking a different path and she's about to win by a lot, like with no chance. So we played twice, only at 2-player, because the game dynamic does change some because the cards are cycled so much more. The cards out that you can buy, the shops and the mines and stuff that you can buy cycle more with the larger group. It goes up to 4 players. So 2-player is a slightly different dynamic. But Elizabeth, when we played a few days ago, she smoked me. And then we played last night, and then it was just clear from an early time that I was on my way to winning, and she was just trying to, shuffle chairs in the Titanic because she wasn't going to beat me. And she even, I was going to win within 1 turn, but to talk about the forgotten mechanic, I'll jump into it, is using the gold token to reserve a card. She saw a card that if I took it, I was going to win, and it was going to take us, and we were going to take off. And so she reserved that. So it just basically delayed the inevitable for 2 more turns for me to win the game. And it was still I think it was 16-12, so I didn't blow her away, but I just had that engine going much, much quicker for sure. So I can definitely relate to that. What I will jump a little bit ahead since I mentioned it. So you can use the gold token to reserve a card, and you can have no more than 3 reserved cards in front of you. Those cards are just placed face down, and if you never buy them, it's okay. And that's an interesting thing because we go back and forth between doing that. If there's a negative aspect or a take that kind of, you can hate draft. If like Elizabeth did to me, you could take something they're trying to buy, and it gives you a gem, a gold that's a wild token basically. What I thought was interesting, so I was So there's this whole thing called World Series of Board Gaming. We'll probably maybe go deeper one day, but essentially it's similar to World Series of Poker, but they're going through board game competitions. And Tom Vassell from the Dice Tower on one of his recent podcasts was talking about how Splendor was one of those games, and he was surprised how many people were reserving cards. But that's the deeper strategy of trying to win that game. As opposed to just trying to build the best engine, you're also looking at what other people are doing and taking cards from other folks. So I agree it's a forgotten thing because we hadn't played Splendor in a while. But historically, reserving card wasn't something I did a lot unless I was one away from it, and that gold gave me that thing. So on my next turn, I could take that card, as opposed to the deeper strategic side of reserving that card.
Yeah, and another beautiful part is Jason touched on it in terms of like the player count absolutely changes this game. So this is definitely one, and I think. As we dive deeper, the player count not only could change the game, but it could also take away from the game. So I think it could change it in a negative way. So playing with 2 players, there are 5 different standard colors for your like gems. You have blue, green, red, white, and black. Or purple. It's hard to tell. We play in a really dim.
We call it chocolate. Room. Like we literally call it like chocolate, even though I don't know if it's an opal because it's not round. I'm holding for those on watching us YouTube. I'm holding it up, but I'm like we call it chocolate, but it's really black. But we always call it chocolate because that's just what we do.
So we were like, so you have those 5 colors and you have the wild card, but in the box it comes with I think 7 of each color for the like standard count. So on your turn, when you gather resources, you can either take 1 of 3 different colors or 2 of the same color. But the problem is you can't take 2 of the same color if there isn't at least 4 available. So that way, in order to not like make sure the resources are drained. But in the 2-player count, you actually take away excess coins so that there's only 4 of each color available. Except for the gold. And so of those 4, that means that if Jason and I are playing against each other and Jason can see that I'm like trying to get red, all Jason has to do is spend 1 turn and just take a red along with 2 other colors that he may be working towards. And he can hold on to that red for the end of time. And if I want to get red, I have to now spend 2 turns going back over the red in order to get it. So you can slow your opponent down in that aspect. Whereas if you're playing with a full table of 7, then like there's going to be a lot more chances, I feel like, to use the double take action versus the like single of 3 colors. So that was definitely something that we noticed on our game. Was the first game we played, I blocked Lindsay doing that, and she like noted it. The second game, neither of us really blocked each other, and then the third game where she killed me was she basically went all in on green and grabbed a green token and just held on to it. So she never had, because as you gather and buy these cards, they help you make things cheaper later on in the game. So instead of having to pay for these tokens, you get towards the mid to late game of the round or whatever it may be called, and you're spending a lot less because you've acquired this bank of coins to spend. So she just held green, and then as I looked to the top and realized, oh, this is where I've been done in, because all the royals needed green.
Yeah.
So I couldn't buy any green cards, and she was just like racking up the royals, and I was like, oh, this is not good.
It is interesting, like, because even think about that. Because spoiler, my strategies always go for the nobles. They're called nobles. I just remembered.
Okay, yeah.
Because the nobles, they go out randomly, and for my YouTubers, I'm holding up what the noble card looks like. You can see this one has a 3 on it, and then 3 green, 3 blue, and 3 red. So what that means is if on your turn you're the first to have 3 blue, 3 green, and 3 red cards in front of you, then you just get that noble. You can't say no to it. So now that's 3 points that have added to your total points. So my strategy is almost always to go for nobles, but I've never played not going for nobles. Whereas Elizabeth kind of goes back and forth because she depends on what she's going for, and sometimes she just goes for bigger cards. So the way the board is, there are 3 rows of cards that have 4 cards in each row, and that's what you are buying essentially. So I'll hold up, here's for our YouTubers. So basically, here's a couple cards that all cost 4 gems, 1 of each color, and so they'll be on the first row. But then there's one that would go on the second row is like 2 1s and then a 2. And so now you got to have more for that, and it gives you points as well. And then one in the third row actually costs 7 emeralds and 3 rubies. So there are big points on that third row that cost more gems. But if you just focus on thinking about for that third row, because the noble is only 3 points, well, this card is 5 points. So it's a totally different strategy. And I realized playing with the 2-player game that maybe going purely for nobles maybe wasn't the best thing for that, for sure. Because I've never really thought about going for card strategy as well. And so this is kind of like an enlightening thing for me for playing the other night, because it was 2 players. In a 4-player game, the board changes so much. That first row especially, like pretty much every time we've ever played a 3 or 4-player game, every single first row card gets taken because they cost so little to get, and they help build up your engine of your minds, like Robbie was talking about. If I have 3 reds in front of me, well, now I have at least 3 to buy 3 reds the rest of the game. You never lose those. And as you get more tokens, more chips, so more poker chips, which are basically the emeralds. Now, if I had 3 red and 3 red permanently in these 2, and now I have 5 buying power to turn back in. So you try to build up your resources, your bank, your money. So that first row goes away really fast. But in the 2-player game, we didn't even get through the first row, because once we got up to a certain amount, the other cards weren't cycling, so we had specific cards we were targeting. Whereas in that 4-player game, more of those cards in the second row go away. So you may have been going for that one that was 2 red, 2 green, and 1 blue. And now, well, dang, the next one that came out is now 3 black and 2 red. So now I got to kind of change what I'm going for in that. So the dynamic, to piggyback on what Robbie said, the dynamic of a 3 or 4-player game will definitely change. That's what makes Splendor so great in my mind. Is quick, snappy turns. You're doing one of 3 things. You're either taking gems, tokens, you're buying a card, or you're reserving a card. So it's pretty quick. And at a 2-player, the board is one way. 3-player and 4-player, each of those are slightly different. So the gameplay can be very different. A lot of my favorite games, the gameplay is very similar, whether it's Wingspan is that way. It's very similar to 2-player, 3-player, 4-player. In general, it's very similar. Whereas this, because the board changes so much on what's available, you're kind of pivoting on what those things can be. And I realized that in my gameplay with Elizabeth, because it went so fast, I was like, wow, that was done way too fast. But I'm like, well, it was a 2-player game. What did I expect? A 4-player game? Well, I think I would have had more fun, because it would force me to think more through what was going on, because the board dynamic changes so much.
Yeah, and you really can, like, if you're paying attention at all to what the other person's doing, then you can even, in a 2-player game especially, kind of adjust and be like, all right, like in that last game, Lindsay had 5 emeralds just chilling. So it was like, if a green card popped up, I just knew, all right, there's like like if the cost to buy the card was high and green, I didn't even try to go for it at the end. I think I ended the game with like 1 green card maybe, just because it was like, all right, she has them, and she's going to continue to go for that. So you can adjust and pivot around the other people, for sure. I do, like, you talk about strategy. That was one thing that I do think this game does really well, is that I would say there are very few strategies that can be applied to this game. Like, at its base level, you're either going for, like, you got to get points. So you're either going for the cards on the board, or you're going for the nobles.
Yep.
That's really it. However, and like, if you go for the cards, you can accidentally get nobles. And if you're going for the nobles, eventually you're going to be able to buy something each turn, meeting your nobles. So you might as well just end up with cards as well, kind of a deal. So you can really get to this in 2 different ways, and that's where Lindsay and I ended up having a whole discussion afterwards, because something she says my worst habit when it comes to games is, when I lose, in my mind, I am trying to process what happened in that game and what could I have done differently. Like, did they have a really good strategy and I had a good strategy, and we both put our strategies together and she just executed hers better? did she have a really good strategy and I misplayed my strategy and that's why it didn't work, or vice versa? Or did we both have bad strategies and someone just kind of played worse better, kind of a deal? So I'm like that kind of player, always going through processing. Like I rarely play a game and don't walk away without thinking about it. And so Lindsay and I had a whole discussion on strategy after that one. And she was pretty open about like, hey, I'm trying to get the nobles. Like that is, I looked at the nobles and I saw green was the common factor. And that, like, I was much more of what you were saying with Elizabeth of I want to buy the big cards. So I start stacking up. But then once you buy that big card, that's only one. So if the next card that flips out isn't good for you, you kind of back to square one and then you're doing that. So it can make the game go really fast if you get the right cards flipping over, which would probably help in a larger table setup. But in a 2-player where, like she's just going for nobles, she doesn't care. Like she doesn't need points. She's just going to buy another level 1 green or level 1 red or whatever it may be to keep her engine going. So I did think that was super fascinating. Now, thematically, I love when a game really makes the theme feel immersive. Like there are so many games that I can think of. I even go to viticulture, where it was like in viticulture, you are like, you have the feeling of making the wine. Everything ties into it. It's seasonal. You're making the actions. Even the Great British Baking Show game that I talked about, like I could hear, because you start every round with red on your mark, get set, bake. And so we were like making references to the show while we were playing the game. So it's all right there. Thematically, I think this game, and this will kind of tie into another point of expansions, thematically, you could get rid of every single piece of art here and just make it colors.
Yep.
And it would stick. Like, it is very, the theme, is not like, I miss the theme entirely in this game.
I totally agree. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until I went and read the Board Game Geek description that I even knew you were buying more than mines. But if you look at the cards, because again, to your point, the art is actually great. If you look at this card, it's some people hiking in the snow. For those who are listening to this, and then so that's not a mine, but you permanently have that diamond the rest of the game. I'm like, wow, this art is pretty amazing. I love the art off the front of the box. It's really cool because the art in the front of the box is of a jeweler looking really close at a diamond. Just super cool, but not thematic at all. I like nowhere near. Here's one like this is in Venezia, like I know because I've been there, but I'm like, so maybe they're selling jewels or something. So, but Robbie's 100% correct. It could be it could just be colors. Hey, let's collect colors. And once you have this many colors, you get this bonus, i.e. the nobles visit you. Doesn't mean it's a bad game by any stretch because you're still working the game. But this is the first one. Because even Cascadia is a little pasted on, but I'm creating this area and I'm drawing animals to it, and animals live in that area, and there's the drawing and there's the colors of those things on there for sure. So it's even more thematic than what this is. Now they fixed that to an extent with the expansions. This is the first time we've really talked about expansions, and we own the expansions, and I forgot about them, so we didn't play with them, but I went to go look them up. So they actually changed some things up. They get rid of one expansion, gets rid of the nobles, and it's just you're basically going and visiting a city after you've gathered all these things, and it's to win the game, you have to meet one of the conditions of these 3 cities that are just put up there, and it could be 15 points or 14 points, 3 red and 4 black. And you can't even win without that, right? You have to. The game is still kicked off with 15 points to win the game. It's still the same game, still the same end game, but you can't even claim one of those cities unless you meet that. So now it kind of changes that up for sure. There's one, I forgot what it's called, but it basically gives you abilities that if you once you now have 2 red and 2 3 red and 3 white. You put a little banner up there, and now you can now have this, because you've advanced in your capabilities, you now have the ability to turn 2 gems in for any other gem or something to that effect. And then there's one more that adds a whole other side to the board, and I forgot what that module was, but essentially it's more cards that you can buy now that become wilds in your mines and in your items, or it's just once you buy it, it's automatically you get a gold piece. So it tries to change up the sameness of it and tries to add a little bit more thematics as opposed to the basics of it. And I think it does well. There's a 4th module that I didn't really like, and even I went and listened to some reviewers. They all kind of agree it's almost to take that. It's where you're blocking people from doing stuff. And this game didn't need you to block somebody from being able to buy a card, right? Because other than reserving a card, they already can affect you, or buying a card that you want to buy. That's how you kind of do that. But there's no reason to be able to just, oh, hey, I know you really want this, but I'm just going to block it and do that. So that was one aspect of it. So yeah, the expansions, it's not a must-have expansion in my mind, but if you own Splendor and have played it for a while, adding those expansions gives you up enough variety to put a little spice back into it. But for a beginner, like I remember Elizabeth and I have played this so many times. And mostly because it is so quick. It's easy to learn. It's quick and easy to teach for sure. And then once you get going, you realize how the game goes. And it's even a 4-player game is maybe 30 minutes, including the teach, unless people go really slow. And then, okay, let's shuffle it up and let's do it again. And then in an hour, you can play 2 games that are pretty heady for a newer player to think about what card or what noble they're trying to go for.
Yeah, I completely agree. And when I was looking at this inside the store, they had a Marvel version of Splendor where you're collecting the Infinity Stones to a gauntlet, but it also added extra modifiers like of visits and things like that. So I even think thematically, like, it's not the Renaissance theme is very hard for me to get into already. Like as I think about my collection, there aren't a lot of games that I'm like really there for, but Lindsay, huge, like that honestly got her to sit down with it a lot easier. And even she was a little disappointed that, like the Henry VIII comment was something she made afterwards, not during, kind of a deal. So that aspect of it, I think, definitely could have some change to it. Now, I will say, like, for the pieces, I was shocked. I remember the coins being there, but I just think of most often when coins are in a game, if you don't upgrade the bits of the game, coins inherently are just not well done in a game. Right. Like, they're very cardboardy. You punch out, you have like a whole little set of them, you punch them out. Okay, here we go. These coins are sturdy. Right. Like the base game.
You can hear that the poker chip type things are nice.
Yeah. And so that was super impressive to me. I liked that aspect of it. Now, let's talk about replayability, if that works for you, Jason, because like I said, we played it 3 times back to back. And it didn't take us more than an hour with 2 people running it. And I do think that there is replayability if you were bringing it to different groups, different things like that. But I agree with Jason in terms of, like, I would want more. Now that I know Lindsay's strategy going for the royals or whatever, or for the nobles, like, it becomes very easy to counter that strategy. And there's really not, like I said, a lot of options to expand on that. So it's hard for me to imagine, oh man, I'm just going to play this. We're going to put this out on the table and we're going to play it every night this week.
Right.
So replay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's. I was going to say, when I first for us, when we first got it, we played it a ton, because if I showed you my cards, you can see how often you don't even hold these cards in your hand. You literally just get them and move them over. But we've touched them and shuffled them so much, they're clearly cards that have been played a lot. And because in our early days, it was such an easy game to get to it's an easier game to get to the table, especially if you store it well. You're just getting out your 1, shuffling, your 2, shuffling, your 3, shuffling, depending on how many players you have, remove those tokens, and then you go. And that's just fast. What I meant to say earlier, and how big Splendor is, so we talked about our very first episode, we talk about in the world of gaming, like table hobby gaming, there's the 3 games of the OG games, which are Carcassonne, Ticket Ride, and of course Settlers. And then there's next tier. Splendor is probably in that second tier, maybe third tier at most, but probably in that second tier, even though it's 2014. So it's not that long ago, though it is, 9 years ago, I guess. Is that right? Yeah, my math is right. Public math is hard. 9 years ago, the hobby gaming has blown up in the last 10 years or so, or 5 years really, with COVID helped it, among other things. But it is definitely in that second tier of games that people get introduced to. And as a newer game, it's such a great game for that, because you can bring non-gamers into it. Gamers who are still newer or who know it will happily go play it because they know it's such a quick game. But definitely for someone like me who has, it's just one on my shelf, so many other games on the shelf, it's not going to hit as much, especially not at 2 players. When Elizabeth and I played it, I was like, I still got the feels, but it's just not the same for me because I've played it so much. But we played it a ton at 2 when I first got into the gaming, and I loved it. And we played it over and over and over. And one more bonus as to why it's still such a good game, but why it may not hit my table as much, is that I watch a lot of board game content, and they do top 10s and top 100s each year, and Splendor routinely stays on the people's favorite top 100, even though there's so many other games people think are better, because it's still such an evergreen game, right? It's such a game that will always be out there. It's easy. In the board game world, there's a term, hey, it's a Splendor killer. This new game is going to be a Splendor killer because it's a set collection game that's really easy. Well, somehow Splendor still hangs out, and those Splendor killers eventually get off the list of people's favorite. There's a reason why so many people love this game. Now, the replayability is not as high for me or Robbie because we have so many other games to play, and we've played it a lot. But for a newer player, it's hard to recommend a better game than Splendor, just to get you for a quick, easy game. You and your kids, you and your spouse, you and your friends, put it out, play it, pretty quick and easy.
Yeah. And so that is part of the reason why I was like, oh man, we'll buy it for sure, even though the library didn't have it, was because I knew, this is one that people are going to want to know about. They're going to talk about. Like you were talking about that next tier. I even when at a party on Saturday, and someone was like, Robbie, have you ever heard of the game Azul? And you ever played Azul? I was like, I have definitely heard of Azul, and I'd be willing to bet Azul is working its way up the ranks into a similar place as Splendor in terms of those more simple and yet there's layers to it. Now, one game that I want to talk about, one other game in comparison to this, Jason, and then I want to talk about the price, because the price is actually super fascinating for this game to me, especially speaking as someone who just bought it. So let's talk about, in terms of comparing this game, I asked Lindsay, what would you rate it? And we'll get to our ratings in a second. And Lindsay called it a chocolate chip. She put it up there for her, which is, proves it's standing over time. And I said, I get that. I totally hear that. If you had to choose, though, with the 2 of us playing between this and Machi Koro, which one would you pick? And she was like, with just 2 of us, I would pick Splendor. And I said, great. Now, if we play with 4 people, would you rather play this or Machi Koro? And she was like, with 4 people, I'd rather play Machi Koro by a landslide. So Machi Koro, I bet we'll end up doing, I keep saying we'll do an episode, but Machi Koro is another very simple game that has a element of, there's a marketplace, and your events are happening, you're getting resources, you're buying things from the marketplace to build your city, and you go forth. The thing about Splendor versus Machi Koro to me is that Splendor, there can be a little bit of analysis paralysis in terms of what do I want to buy, especially when you start getting towards the end of you're trying to string together your buys, but the board's shifting around. So now I'm stuck. Okay, you took what I wanted. I don't know. Whereas, so when it's not your turn, basically the only action that you have or involvement in the game is just simply hoping that this person's not going to take what you want, or if they do, that something that you want is going to replace it. So there's a lot of there's a lot of negative hopefulness in terms of when it's not your turn. Whereas Machi Koro, with a larger player count, sure, numbers can be rolled that you owe people things, whatever it may be. But if you have the right, like as you roll these die, if a number lands of a building you own, you get paid. So when it's not your turn, you're still heavily invested in the game because you can get paid out. So I do think with a 4-person player count, although this does play fast, that is a drawback in my mind of like, because the game is so simple at its core, it would probably grind my gears really bad to play this with someone who just overthought every single purchase.
Yeah. There's definitely the potential for that, for a game that is so quick and easy. I could see that for sure. Thankfully, even historically, I haven't experienced that, but it's definitely there because, as you said, as the game goes, like, what do I want to get, a red, a green, and a black? Because this card's here, but the next time it comes up, it could be gone. What are my odds for this? And then, so I could definitely see that. Which can be frustrating. Whereas Machi Koro, you're relying on die rolls. You know, I don't necessarily love games with die rolls, but the principle of it, it's going to be what it's going to be. You don't really have to think about it. You don't have to super crunch it. You don't have to. There's very little AP in a game like Machi Koro, and it can be a snappier play because on that person's turn they're going to roll and they're going to buy something, and they're going to roll if they buy something, and they're going to get their coins and buy something, and that's it, right? And so while the game play can be similar, you can go a little longer in Machi Koro, just if the die roll go bad, but you're always doing something, and you very rarely get stuck with like, I don't really know what to do. You're going to roll die, you're going to use your resources, you're going to use your money to buy something. Whereas I could see that definitely in Splendor with someone who struggles with it, especially, thankfully most of the, with newer players, we often have one of two. One is I don't really know what to do, so I don't do anything, or like I don't know what to do, so I'm gonna do whatever, right? And I always encourage do whatever. Like it doesn't matter. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Just do it. Yeah, do it. If you want me to give you suggestions, I will, but just do it. Don't do nothing. That's actually like it's not helpful to everybody, and it's not helpful to you either. Because doing nothing, you're in your mind, that anxiety is picking up about, well, am I supposed to do this? Well, just go do something, right? And thankfully, most of the newer players I played with it for the whole time I've been here in Virginia, they don't get stuck with that new player analysis paralysis. They're usually like, okay, I'll just do this or I'll do that. And that's the best advice I can give to people newer players playing games is just do something, right? It may not go well, but hey, most of those games hopefully are quick, and now on the next time through, you kind of know. And it doesn't, for me, I like to win, and I will analyze stuff at the end of the game to see how I could have done something different as well. But especially the last few years, I just like the journey of it and the experience of seeing what I can do in that game. So I can definitely see that. It's funny you mentioned Azul, because even though they're different games, Azul is one of those games that's considered a Splendor killer, because there's some tactile nature for Azul. We'll eventually talk about, there's a few different Azul games, and we own 2 of them. So you haven't played Azul then, Robbie?
I've not played traditional Azul. I've only played some Reveal.
We played some. You play, okay, all right. We'll play traditional Azul this time, because now that you got the gist of, you can get the gist of it anyway, but now you need to have got that off your checklist, because it's becoming Azul is definitely a 3rd tier level game to introduce to people. It's one we introduced Summer Pavilion because it's a little nicer, and when you play Azul, you'll see how main Azul can be punishing with bad luck. So anyway, I digress. I can kind of agree with that. What's funny is because at its heart, Splendor is a set collection game, right? You're collecting coins to go get another set of things to add up. And we all kind of understand what set collection. Rummy is set collection game. Different games, but you're basically holding on to stuff to get stuff to play and have a set collection. So I like the ease of that for certain. Yeah.
So price point. This comes in currently listed on Amazon at $23, but that is a lie, because it is actually a $45 game is what it's listed as. And if you if you Google it, you're like, oh, it's $23. And then if you just zoom in on the old Amazon, you'll see a little gray slash and it says $45. So do I think this game is worth $45? Absolutely not. I do not think that you should pay full price for it. But because it is a classic, it's been around since 2014, you can find it on sale pretty much all the time. But be warned, if you happen to walk into a place like a Target or something and you want to buy this game, it's going to be listed at $45. And unless you get them to price match or do whatever, you're going to overspend on this game. So that is, I want to touch on that because I think that like when this game got released, if I looked at the quality of those chips, I would be like, okay, cool. I could see why that, like, if that carried throughout, I could see, okay, we're at a $45 game, but there's not a board. You have cardboard tiles and playing cards, and then these really nice chips. So just a warning, if you are listening to this and you're like, that sounds like a really classic game, I got to check out Splendor. Do not pay $45 for this game.
I 100% echo Robbie's statement there. And thankfully, if you really want it and you just bide your time, you can definitely find it in the low 30s is the most I pay for this. Right now on Amazon, they're just having a really good sale on a lot of games I already own, unfortunately. So, but there's like a lot of these games are half price at Amazon, just a random sale going on. So yeah. $23 is probably the lowest you'll typically see it, but anywhere in that $25 to $30 range is where you can find it as a normal sale. And that's definitely, for a newer player, it's definitely worth that. One thing, we won't go into the details of it, but if you only play 2-player games, right? If for some reason the nature of your life, you live a remote village in Alaska and it's just you and your spouse, there is a Splendor dual version of this game that is amazing. I waited till the end to say that because if you're only going to play this at 2 players, I would get the Splendor Duel. If you know you'll never play more than 2 players, Splendor Duel adds a little bit different way in which you draft the coins and gives you a little bit of different bonus abilities as you complete things. And maybe we'll talk about it later on, but it's still the same. You're still gathering, you're still getting mines, you're still getting travelers and stuff for the points. So you're still getting cards for the game, and you're still getting gems that you're turning in to get those cards to build your engine. But all the gems are out on a board, and the way you draft those is different and pretty unique. And it very quickly became, when it came out this past year, because I think it was in 23 or maybe 22, it came out. Most board gamers are like, oh, absolutely, they'll never play Splendor at just 2 players again. They will always play Splendor Duel because it spices it up some. So if 100% you're never going to play this more than 2-player, I would definitely look at Splendor Duel. It gives you the same feels and some different additional bonus actions you take while you're doing that. But if you're ever going to play it more than 2, then like we've talked about in this game in this episode, more than 2, the game dynamic changes and the replayability definitely goes up for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right, Robbie. So what is? I'm sorry, I paused too long. So all right. So now it's time for we're already over an hour. Wow, whew, this is our longest one yet. So which is exciting. Yeah. So now it's time to do the cookie rating. We want to know. I'm going to let you go first on this one. It'd be interesting to know, like, all right, guess down below if you're watching on YouTube what you think it is before Robbie does this. But what is going to be your cookie rating for this game?
Yeah. So I think that. It's fun because we even mentioned on the last episode of like when we play with people, we should ask them like what would they rate this game and whatnot. So having the opportunity to really get the person that I played with, all right, what would you rate this? And she threw it a chocolate chip. That's a little higher than I'm gonna give it because I think for me personally, what nails it down for me is the last question of if I was playing this, would I rather play this or a Machi Koro based on how the turn like waiting can be. Now, I got really upset with another content company who made a game review, and the whole game review was like, hey, this game's okay in comparison to this game. So I don't want to be hypocritical here and be like, I'm lowering the rating because I think Machi Koro's better or anything like that. It just, the presence of Machi Koro and a simple set collection game, when I look at this, I think that Splendor to me is on the verge between a chocolate chip and a peanut butter. Because I think that if you're building a game collection, Splendor's one that you probably should have in the collection because it is evergreen. It is a classic. And honestly, it's one that I look forward to playing with my kids one day. Like that. It really does seem like such an easy game to teach a child because it's like, oh, right, you're teaching them numbers and colors. That's it. So because of that, I'm going to rate it at a peanut butter, but it's a high peanut butter for me. So I like, if the theme settled on it a little more, it would bump up to a chocolate chip for me. If there was more positive player interaction, it would bump up to a chocolate chip for me. If like there's just a couple things that I'm like with a little tweak, and that's why I think if we included expansions, it would be a chocolate chip for me. But base game alone, I'm gonna have to leave it at a high peanut butter, like a beautifully baked peanut butter. So, how about you, Jason?
That's good. I can hear everything saying, and I definitely can have the same sentiment with those things. When we first started playing, if you'd asked me this 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, I'm with Lindsay. This is chocolate chip. Love the game. Played it a ton. We used to always joke so much that the first player had the first player, advantage because they would always win because they're always one chip ahead. That's not really the case, but that was our joke. We played this so many times. Like, whoever goes first, you're going to win. Just guess the way it's going to go, right? So it would have been a chocolate chip 5-6 years ago, but having played it the last 2 days, at 2-player albeit, having played it the last 2 days, mine is definitely very much a sugar cookie. So to remind everybody, it's double doozy, chocolate chip, peanut butter, sugar, and then oatmeal raisin. Doesn't mean it's bad. Lots of people love sugar cookies, and that's the whole point of our rating, right? For me, it's down at that level, and if someone wants to play it, without doubt, I'm going to play it. And I'll happily play it. I'll happily teach it and have fun playing it and play it a couple times. I will never go say, hey, let me teach you Splendor, because I have the bonus of playing it so much. And I also have the bonus of I've spent way too much money on way too many games that I have other stuff that gives similar feels in similar time frames. Azul Summer Pavilion, which I showed Robbie on one of his trips, right? The Azul Summer Pavilion is one we often show people. Very different game, but it's similar feels and similar time frame, right? Doesn't mean Splender's not a great game. It was a Spiel des Jahres nominee for a reason because it's an awesome game. It's an evergreen game. It stays on the board or on Dice Tower's most popular one for the people's vote for sure. But for me, it's a sugar. If I add like Robbie, if you add the expansions, it definitely goes up to peanut butter. Maybe even chocolate chip, right? Because the expansions, 3 of the modules are really good, and I really do like them. Splendor Duel, and I know I threw that in at the very end, so I apologize for hijacking the podcast about that. Splendor Duel is definitely a chocolate chip for me because it's a 2-player only game. The same way Seven Wonders Duel, totally different thing on Seven Wonders, is similar. People saying the same thing because it has enough different dynamics that it changes the game for sure. And I'm a more heavier gamer, right? So for what I'm looking for, that's what it gives it for me. But I can still remember playing this, teaching my mom, teaching my brother, and just having a great time. So for a brand new player, I totally agree, right? And we've talked about that. Maybe an episode we have one day where we talk about what are the essential games a newer gamer has in their collection. Not necessarily every gamer, but a newer gamer. Splendor, I don't think there's any doubt it's in there. It's that good of a game. But for me right now, it is definitely a sugar cookie. Fun to eat, tastes really well, but someone else would have to get it off the shelf. Someone else had to ask me to play for me to play it.
Yeah, this is a game that I fully plan on taking to family holidays with Lindsay's family to let you talk about Splendor killers. I'm looking for Monopoly deal killers. That is what I am trying to move past because Monopoly Deal is a set collection game, set collection card game, and this is a more fun set collection card game that I think has a lot less hurt feelings around it. So I think truly from a beginner standpoint, if you are looking for a great game to add into your list, and also I don't know that people are really thinking about this, Jason, but I know that like there are some. So some of you are listening to this and you're like, because we made fun of it the first episode, the people that walk in and they're like, oh yeah, I play Settlers, big Settlers guy, instead of saying Catan or whatever it may be. And you want to walk in, if you walk up and you're like, oh yeah, I played Settlers before, pretty much any serious hobby board gamer is going to look at you like, okay, kindergartner, like glad you're welcome to the table. Splendor to me is one that if you walk up and you're like, oh, I've played Splendor a lot, I enjoy it. I don't think that any serious hobby gamer is going to look, they're not going to hold their nose up to you about the fact that you played Splendor. It is way more welcomed than a Catan is. So great game to play, great one to check out. And like I said, even at the $23, $30 range, it really does have a lot of high replay. I'm not going to take Jason's stance to say I'll never pull it to the table, but I also don't own as many games as Jason. So that is totally fair. But overall, this is our lowest rated. It's funny because it's like the most classic game we've done yet, and it's our lowest rated game by average. But we're still speaking so highly of it.
Yeah, and we both say you should own it as a newer gamer. Like, that's how great this game is, and the reason why I've never gotten rid of it, right? I've gotten rid of a lot of older games that I just don't play. Like, games I won't play anymore. I've kept Settlers. That's probably the only game, mostly because it's so beat up. Like Robbie has his that's never been opened or never been punched, right? It's been opened but not punched. You look at mine, you're like, oh, wow, Jason has played that game a lot. It's sitting over there. It's almost like I keep it for a historical piece. Splendor I keep because we have played it so much. Like, even though I just said I wouldn't take it off, it's on the shelf in case somebody else wanted to play it. I would happily do it. That's how much I think of that game. And as being a part of a collection for sure. It's not one I'm going to ask for, but it's that great. So a lowest rating on a game that's probably the best one you should own for a brand new player for sure. So it is a very, very unique episode for sure.
And also, I'm going to go ahead and say this because we're in November now as you guys are listening to this. Splendor, at its cost, great game to be like, hey, Grandma Cheryl, whatever, whoever you want to list, they're looking for like a holiday option for you. Very affordable, way easier for them to like jump in on that than to, let's say, like, oh, hey, Grandma, can you buy me Dinosaur Island? Like, it's going to cost you a little more to jump into those. So this is a fantastic option. But as always, we want to say thank you guys so much for listening. A little bit of a longer episode. Hopefully we didn't get you rambly. Let us know if there's any parts that we went a little too deep on, that you guys were like, hey, I saw you were excited. Calm it down there. Your feedback. This podcast, I'm going to say that this podcast is 80% for you, 20% for us in its current state. We are, Jason and I love the chance to get down and be able to chat, but truly we want to make sure that we're helping you guys find the games and get to the table and have a great time while you're out there. So, Jason, any final thoughts?
Yeah. I echo what Robbie said. 80%, selfishly, I'm probably more like 60-40, but I need to get it to 80-20, right? I need to focus more on that. Like, I'm slowly transitioning and trying to do better to focus on this because I, at the beginning, said, hey, selfishly, I just want to talk about board games, but having a focus for that is good. It helps me not just go too super geeky deep, and I definitely love, like I said, I've gotten a few little messages from disc golfers who've talked about games. Some are hardcore gamers, some are newer gamers, some loving having those conversations for sure, and we're trying to definitely make this 80-20. Robbie's going to be here next week, so it's going to be exciting to have a bunch of different games where if Ryder can come over either Tuesday or Thursday, we're definitely going to do a Dinosaur Island night so we can actually play Dinosaur Island. Hey, for those who watch this, at least watch on YouTube, put any comments on what games you want us to play, that maybe it's one that we can talk about in our next time or talk about in a future time. Some people have already asked that about Power Grid and TI4, so they're ones like that. So let us know what games you think Robbie and I should play, just to play for the fun of it. What games could be good games to talk about on the podcast as a beginner one. So we appreciate that. Thanks, y'all.
Absolutely. And we will see you guys for the next episode.